Good afternoon, sim captains and crew. Welcome to Nauru International Airport on the small island of Nauru, or Nauru, depending on how you'd like to pronounce it. This is the world's smallest republic. It's actually only barely missing being the world's smallest country behind Vatican City and Monaco. We're going to be taking this 737 Model 800 from here to Fiji's Naidi International Airport. The Model 800 is not actually flown by Nauru Airlines. They are, I believe, flying a current fleet of 5 737-400 models, with some being combis. However, for the moment, this is going to do us nicely. It is also the only Nauru Airlines livery that I had available, and it's also the 737 I have available. So let's go inside, and I'm going to start powering us up here. Batteries. Connecting ground power. Ground power on bus. Let's begin aligning our IRS. Gonna flow down the panel a bit here. Yaw dampers. I prefer my panel brights to be full brightness. Click on our seatbelt signs. And we'll continue that in a moment. Let's start the boarding process here. So we're going to open our doors and the cargo doors. Let's start our flight leg. Position lights on. Electric pumps, electric hydraulic pumps on. A quick walk around, although the wonderful part of the simulator being we can be quite confident everything is exactly as it should be out here on the walk around. But it is nice just to take a look at what a wonderful job Zibo has done with this model. The livery for Nauru Airlines is actually downloadable with this airport. It's kind of hidden in there. I didn't actually notice it until after I had the airport that it was included. Although if you read more closely on the X-Plane forum, you would probably notice that before I did. You can find on the internet pictures of the actual terminal, and it looks like they've done a very precise job of rendering it exactly as it stands. Being about 8 square miles, the island of Nauru, this airport and runway, if you look at it on Google Earth, actually takes up a decent chunk of real estate for a country this size. Alright, let's get back inside and keep things moving here. Window heat. We'll come back for the probe heat later. Trim air. Set our cruise altitude to flight level 350. Our weather today is just going to be broken clouds at flight level 300, which puts our cruise just slightly above it. And I will admit to having cheated here on the time and the weather for this flight, simply because it's a simulator, and I have found that the weather I've selected makes for a beautiful sunset out here in the South Pacific. Interestingly enough, we are just about on the equator here on the island of Nauru. Sort of roughly halfway between the Solomon Islands and the Marshall Islands. Get our FMC going. It's been telling me I have corrupted nav data, but I've been a little bit lazy on going and dealing with that, but it's not created any issues yet. Our ICAO code is ANYN. See our GPS coordinates at about the equator there. We're not horribly far from the international date line, although it's not exactly that close to it, but certainly closer than most people live to it. Our destination in Fiji is ICAO N, FFN. Route is relatively short here. Better go look that up in our brief. I'm not entirely certain which one of these we've got. Generally speaking, it's usually the first one on the list. 113.0. Today's the second. Alright, forward me. Next is Jetway Golf 223. Bull Row. Continuing on Golf 223. To November. There we go. So I guess it was superfluous, the Bull Row there. Alright, let's activate. Peek our head up. Oh, our IRS has already aligned our time. I was kind of hoping to be off right about now, but that's okay. We can make up some time here moving quickly. Let's finish up with our cabin. Close the doors. And on the Zibo, you can signal your flight crew that you're ready to go by turning on your anti-collision lights, even though the engines are not going to start quite yet. Click our APU to start.
Boarding is now complete. Flight attendants prepare the cabins. Verify arm doors, standby for all call.
There we go. Get our center fuel pumps as well. Our fuel on board today is 36,800 pounds of fuel. Our reserve is 2,500 pounds. Interestingly enough, our diversion airport is just to come back here to the island of Nauru. This particular spot in the South Pacific, there really are not a lot of better options. Alright, get our performance. Check our weights. Takeoff weight is 128.1. Takeoff CG 17.4. Mentioned already, our reserves are 2.5. Cost index today is 10, so we're taking it easy, although we're not moving particularly slow. We're going to go at Mach 0.78, which is pretty much, I believe, the designed standard cruise speed for the NG series of 737s. And our initial cruise altitude is flight level 330, but we will step up to 350 later in the flight. Leave off the winds for now. I know, shame on me, you really should not rely on the true air temperature reflected here, sort of like looking at your car's outside air temperature for accuracy. But the level of immersion I'm interested in the sim is also a little more efficient than those who are going for full on, let's do it 100% realistically. So we've got our outside air temperature, we're not going to derate. Takeoff flaps will be 5. CG was 17.4. Trim at 5.45, so we're going to adjust that here. Yeah, we'll call that about 5.5. Alright, let's go back up to the overhead. Flowing down, row 1 looking good, row 2 is fine. Our APU is up, so let's kick that in. And before I can forget, move our ground power. Ground power disconnected. Alright, our skinny center is set. Seat belts. Third column is good for pre-engine start, and fourth column, turn on our APU bleeds. Temperature is actually not bad in here for the tropics. Wonderful winter. Let's see what our cabin temperature is. Yeah, we're under 30. That'll be alright for the moment. So I'm going to skip the packs, and I believe we are ready for an engine start here. Let's go on outside for just a moment. You can see we're going to go straight on out here and then taxi back. We'll be departing runway 30 today. Alright, start 2. N2 is climbing. Cut in our fuel at about 23 to 25% N2. 23 by the time I get down here. There we go, it's probably about 25. Alright, EGT and N1 are rising. Appears I didn't set my V speeds here. Our V1 will be 127 knots. Our V rotate is 128 knots. And we'll lift off a V2 of 141 knots. V1 sort of important at these island airports, as most of the runways pretty much dump you straight in the ocean should you have an overrun. Engine starter has kicked back to auto, and let's go to start number 1. Right, N2's rising, and there's our 23. Fuel mixes in. Wait for the starter to kick back. There we go. All right. Put our engine generators on bus. Our packs to auto, isolation valve to auto, close the APU bleeds, turn on probe heats. See if there's anything else upstairs here that requires our attention. Skipping most of the pre-flight safety check. Again, beauty of the sim. Unless you set the failure rate to something where these things could happen, it's pretty much a given you're going to have smooth sailing. Alright, looks like we're ready to turn off our APU. Got a nice little plug-in here called the Airport Navigator. You can see it pops up this overlay. See our runways. You can also pull up the comm information. It's just sometimes a little quicker than checking your chart, and so you get this nice red icon reflecting your location. So if you have a more complex more complex airport you're navigating around, it can help. Although it's largely superfluous now that the Avatab has included in it the icon. Although I have noticed not every chart is going to have what you're looking for. Oh, that's interesting. Usually I should have a tab here too. Well, that's interesting. I don't have a plate popping up today. Regardless, we're going to move out here onto the runway, head down to our left to depart runway 30. Let's do a little welcome speech.
Good morning, folks. I'm Flight Deck Captain, and for the ride, it looks like it should be pretty good. So we're playing out a smooth ride. If there is just a 10 in the base, maybe 310, we'll talk to you once we get airborne. Hold on.
Right, I have a little keyboard issue here, so we're going to pause for a moment, and we'll be right back to depart from Nauru for Fiji. And we're back. I thought I had a little technical issue with perhaps keyboard batteries. It turns out the keyboard was fine. When I went to type in Avatab earlier, I think Avatab was still intercepting all of my keyboard commands as though they were inputs, and so nothing was actually working, which would have made it a little bit interesting to depart, since I do tend to use a lot of keyboard commands. Alright, at the moment, it looks like we've got most of our basic items set here, so let's move our flaps to 5. Kind of nice at these small airports, we get to skip the pushback. I'm going to turn on flight path vector here, which won't do anything yet, but we'll get a little floater here, our artificial horizon, which shows our actual flight path and not just the angle of attack of the aircraft. Alright, so let's turn on strobes and taxi lights. Time to get moving. Jump back inside. Ready for our taxi back. Fun times. Looks like I've turned on a flight path streamer. I used to use the older versions of X-Plane. I actually remembered which key activated that. I suspect in my mashing the keyboard to activate anything earlier, I turned on this. You can see that little streamer of shadow with a purple line behind me. I'll make sure we get rid of that before I would take off here. Now's not a bad moment to enjoy this little scenery pack. Obviously a labor of love, presumably from someone who either lives in Nauru or has been here. I believe that's a hotel. I think the internet told me a number of the government offices for Nauru are actually located in the province or sector of Nauru that contains the airport. Just for fun, to give you an idea just how small of a place we're dealing with. That's the whole country. Alright, let's take a moment here. I want to get rid of that streamer. And we'll be right back. Alright. Found our key in the settings menu for the keyboard. It is Control P. So, if you'd like to see that, fire it back up here. Control P. It's interesting. It looks like we've got not only a center line projected, but a dark and a light line for our wingtips. It's showing how embarrassingly bad I'm maintaining the center line right now. Looks like when you toggle it the second time, you're going to get that shadowy path under the center line, which is going to be more interesting if you're watching, for example, your climb out or something where you've got a change in elevation to look at. And Control P the third time, and it goes away. Really love this scenery. It's free. Included the Zibo livery for the 800 here. One of the things that I enjoy about X-Plane is going to some of the interesting places in the world that may or may not otherwise have any reason to visit. As fascinating as this place is, knowing myself, I tend to go on vacations of places where family live, and since I have no family members here, I'm unlikely to actually visit. But it certainly is fascinating. I recommend checking out on Wikipedia. There's some interesting stories about Nauru Airlines back when it was Air Nauru. The government was subsidizing it, had an extensive route structure at the time. Their fleet was rather varied. I believe they only had about a 20% load capacity, so about 80% of their capacity was constantly empty. And so when the mining operations of phosphate in the island sort of dried up, so did the subsidies, and then that sort of capacity was certainly not profitable. And there's other entertaining stories. For example, found some stories on the internet that local fishermen might not come back at the end of the day. The families would get worried. Sometimes Air Nauru would take out their 727 and go on low-level searches with the family on board, which I have to admit, not that you want anybody missing, but a low-level fly-around tour with a 727 sounds like a good time. But also, incredible waste of money and fuel, unless you're actually finding someone, and you would suspect there's probably substantially less expensive aircraft to run such a search with. Alright, so let's do our checks here. Probably should have had those lights on as soon as I hit the runway. We are strobing. Down our center pedestal. Not using VATSIM or anything, so we're going to squawk 2000, but it's fairly arbitrary at the moment. So braced, check takeoff. Spoiler is retracted and flaps are set to 5. I believe our takeoff check is basically complete.
On runway 30, on runway 30.
Yes, we are. As much as I love that plug-in, it gets a little irritating. Our V2 today was 141 knots. Set it for about plus 15. Shame on me, I did not actually check what our runway heading is, so I'm just going to fudge it. Joys of the sim. And being essentially the middle of nowhere, we can just do a straight climb out directly to our cruise altitude. Flight level 330, 33,000 feet. Alright, well there's no way we're at an altitude of 200 right now. You can see I've got the pressure setting here to 2992 standard, as opposed to actually setting it because I didn't run the weather. You can cheat by grabbing it from the map here. The altimeter should be 2974. Alright, and let's make the co-pilots match. 2974, they match. Alright, start our clock. NAURU Airlines, flight 17, departing for Fiji, runway 30. Stay inside for that. Arcade mode is a little dangerous for takeoff and landing.
V1 rotate.
15-degree nose up.
Positive rate.
Turn up.
$400. 1,000.
Tracting flaps. continuing our climb. Climbing at 3,300 feet per minute. To set co-pilot's displays to plan mode. It's FMC to program so that easily keep an eye on everything without scrolling, although the throttle handles do seem to obstruct that pretty nicely, don't they? Passing 10,000. Lights up. Cabin crew get to work.
Ladies and gentlemen, the seatbelt sign is still on. Please remain seated. When the captain does turn off the sign, feel free to stand up and stretch your legs at that time. However, we do ask while you're in your seat, please keep your seatbelt fastened at all times in case we do encounter any unexpected clear or turbulence. And for everyone's safety, please make certain all your personal belongings are free and clear of the aisle. You may now use all approved personal electronic devices. We'll be serving a variety of complimentary drinks as well as select beer and wine. In addition, there are other alcoholic beverages. Now we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy our service on tonight's flight. If there's anything we can do to make them enjoyable, please don't hesitate to call upon us. Thank you.
Now I've actually tweaked the time of this flight. I'm hoping for us to arrive in Fiji just at sunset because it looks beautiful over the ocean. Fit our local transition altitude. I think it's 12,000 here, so moving to standard. The altimeter. About 15,000 feet, so a little less than halfway to our initial cruising altitude of flight level 330. Take another peek outside. The way the wingtips converge there, so it throws off the view. So Control P again. There we go. And there you can see our climb profile. Take off at runway 30. Around for our first fix. And the line continues. 20 here in a second. So I think I'm going to get back with you as we start our descent and approach into Fiji's NAD. I hope you've enjoyed our departure so far on NAURU Airlines Flight 17. Welcome back, Sim Captains. We're beginning our descent into Fiji. Our flight time's been just about what we were expected. We were expecting a block time of 3 hours and 24 minutes. And looking at the program screen on the FMC, it looks like we're going to be just about at that, which is excellent because I've set up this flight to hopefully bring us in just about at sunset. I mentioned earlier that I set up some custom weather, and I've found that broken clouds at about 30,000 feet out here in the tropical areas just makes for, first off, a beautiful sunset, and secondly, very nice cloud layer for flying around and through. Now typically I fly with the real world weather active just for the sake of realism, but since this is for a video, there's no need for you to be looking at gloomy gray skies the entire duration of the ride. Our final step was to flight level 350, and so at this point I'm assuming we're probably below flight level 300 because we're now underneath our cloud bank. So let's jump inside. Yeah, there we are, flight level 286 and descending. Got a little bit of speed brake, or spoiler. On departure, as I was attempting to pull up our Navigraph, I was not getting the expected menu, and I think what I realized here is we had an issue with, it appears to be back on a monthly basis. I believe I needed to relink my account. That's interesting. Well, maybe it's not going to give me the chart, but have no fear, I've got the charts loaded in another window. There's 2 runways at Fiji's NAD International. We've got an 0927 and an 0220. At the moment we're planning to land on runway 02. But first we're going to need a little check of our weather. Runway 02 is about 10,500 and odd feet, and the other runway is only about 7,000. The other nice thing with runway 02 is it should bring us right on up to the terminals if we exit at the end of the runway. So I'm going to continue our descent here, and I'll get back with you in a few moments when we're a little bit closer to our actual landing. Alright, Sim Captains, as promised, there's the beginnings of our sunset. Enjoy it here for a moment and maybe see what the view is from the inside. Beautiful, nice reflections they've got. A moment or two ago I was looking out these windows and we had some condensation billowing up over the wings. Really good effects came out with the last X-Plane update. Let's go back up front and take care of some business. We're already under 7,000. Oh, there we go. We've got the 2 main islands of Fiji starting to pop up. So we're going to set our altimeter. We're well below the time we should have done that. 2974. Actually, I believe that's going to be precisely what we left, since I'm on my own custom weather. It's not exactly changing. glancing at this, looks like we're about 50 miles out here. Ah, that is a little issue. To clean that up. Let's see what changes that's made. Let's jump over to the co-pilot seat and look at plan mode. When I was looking at the chart, I selected a navigational point to the west of the final approach, and I have a suspicion that may be able to just skip this last fix of November and just go straight down there to what do we got? FNNSG. I'll admit to not particularly liking when I find a plate that has all of the waypoints labeled extremely similarly. I'm not sure if you just start abbreviating these down to SG, SI, SF. I've seen a few charts where they're all the same except for a few numbers, and it's just not quite as obvious when you're moving quickly about doing things which one is which. So we can start to get set up here. Let's get the brakes set. I'm going to use 2 today. Wind is not much of a factor. Certainly going to be a clear runway. We have no precipitation. I don't believe snow or ice has ever been an issue for Fiji. Check our landing altitude. Runway elevation is 59 feet, and the runway, the airport elevation is 59 feet, and the runway is 26, so we'll go for 50. Put on our fasten seat belt since I've been doing some other things here during cruise. I've neglected some of the cabin calls. Not sure I hear them actually talking back there. Let's do the little descent speech.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, coming in flight deck here. We're on our descent. Seatbelt sounds going to be back for our arrival. If you're up and about, please turn to and turn your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Still showing well ahead of schedule. Thanks again. Hope you have a nice week. I'll be on the camera here very shortly.
There we go. Let's get back up front. Alright, so since we're below 10,000, let's get some landing lights out. I'm noticing I did not activate the wing lights on departure today, so we missed some of our pre-departure conversations that are cued on the Zibo model by turning on the wing lights. Turn on the logo lights now. Just might give us a nice view as the lighting changes here. Contrasting Nauru, our departure airport, Fiji is supposed to have one of the most thriving economies in the South Pacific. Nauru, I'm not quite sure their condition at this point, but they had previously relied substantially on mining, and when that resource was tapped out, a country of only 8 square miles had to really rethink how they were going to run an economy. The reiterations of even this airline sort of reflect the changes in that economy. Used to be originally Air Nauru, and then I believe it was shut down perhaps the late 90s, and then it was restarted, I believe 2006, as Our Airline, O-U-R, and then renamed in 2011 to Nauru Airlines, which quite honestly is a lot more obvious for the rest of us who exactly this airline belongs to than simply saying Our Airline. I think I can agree with whoever decided that name change needed to happen. Let's check in on our descent. Looks like about 35 miles till our turn. One of the things I've enjoyed flying a few times internationally over the Pacific is when you get close on descent like this, there tends to be a lot of ocean shipping traffic, and it's really quite fascinating to see how extremely large these container vessels can be, even from 5,000–10,000 feet. Just an impressive sight. And some of these islands are just gorgeous. I suspect most of the romance of flying for me is really just this, the visuals. There's very few places on the ground you can get a view even a fraction as stunning as you can from the air. Particularly in the more volcanic areas of the world, the scenery is even better. If you're flying over, for example, the eastern coast of the United States, the mountain ranges are substantially older and lower, and not necessarily that fun to look at. Particularly if you've got a lot of overcast, as you usually would during the winter. Alright, we've got about 20 miles till our turn here. Looks like our FO would have the prime spot for watching our sunset today. Other than just the beauty of these areas, certainly historically, there's a lot of interesting connections to Fiji here. British exploration throughout the 1700s certainly left its mark, with Fiji being a colony for quite some time. I believe even the infamous mutiny on the Bounty somewhat connected with Fiji. I'm not sure if that was one of the islands that they had initially stopped at. Alright, so we can see here on our map, we're coming in basically in the direction of the airport right now. And we're going to complete part of a box shape to align us with the runway. Our go around has us completing that box if we need to go around, coming back out and returning pretty much the same as we're trying right now. I'll admit to having flown precious few go-arounds in X-plane. Most of the ones I've needed were due to my poor abilities to land in a crosswind, so crosswind landings tend to turn into crosswind practice sessions requiring 2 or 3 approaches on occasion. Also had an unfortunate go around a few times where I've improperly set the FMC so it did not continue descending, and I've been at an incorrect altitude for the approach. Go. Beautiful sunset. Entire remainder of this flight should be postcard beautiful. You know, it's interesting to think about how these small islands, such as Nauru, with only 8 square miles, is supporting an airline with a fleet of 5 jets. And in some ways, it almost seems excessive for such a small island. But I can only assume, must be hitting our fix November, that jet transport has to have immensely changed the lives and the operation of islanders in the South Pacific, far more than those of us who live on a large landlocked area on a continent. I believe a portion of NAURU Airlines fleet is combis, which seems quite sensible, as any products they would like to get in country sooner than later are going to need to be flown in. I am not regretting turning off the real weather and departing at my own time as opposed to theirs. We would have been arriving about 2 hours sooner had we flown this precisely as it was scheduled. We would have missed this beautiful sunset. Go back in and see how we're coming, and keeping an eye out for the airport at this point, because we should be... there we go. So we're completing our box. You can see right overhead of our jet there, runway 02 when the approach lights, and you can see why the go-around would have you peeling off to the left as you climb down so you don't go straight into volcanic mountains of Fiji. Alright, let's bring our range in. Got a moment before these last turns. Let's set up our VREF for landing. Let's So we're going to do a landing with flaps 40 at a speed of 123 knots. Low and slow. At this point, I still have all the flaps retracted. I'm going to kick out the rest of our landing lights. And we've hit that decel point. So I think I'm ready to put out the slats. I suspect one of the dangers of flight simming when it looks too good is the urge to come out here and play with the camera angles, which you'll notice I'm not resisting that urge very much today. Certainly something that there's no comparable element to in the real world. Air-to-air shots are usually just airline or Air Force promotional items. But here in the simulated world, we can enjoy that all the time. Alright, we're under 200 knots. I'm going to start rolling out our flaps. Perfect. See, our Zulu time is 6:33, and I really was hoping to get us here at 6:35, so we are spot on for our time. All right, now your eyes and mine are probably saying the same thing right now. This RNAV approach as flown by the FMC does not appear to be lining up with the runway. We've got slight bit of crosswind, but very slight. Not enough to have us lining up a quarter mile to the right of our runway, so we're going to take over some of the control. Flaps 10, going for flaps 15, and gear down. Landing lights are on. Not quite at our desired descent. Let's prepare the crew. See, I've drifted substantially to the left. Lined it back up here. Going to flaps 25. Spend a second here in arcade mode. Dare not stay that way much longer. Well, as you can see from the PAPI lights, we are substantially above our intended glide slope, but I think it's safe to say at this point there's absolutely no safe or sane way to put this aircraft on that runway. So I'm not going to bore you to death with this go around. At this point, I'm gonna give us a few moments of glorious sunset. That sunset that's getting me in trouble right now.
Too high.
Yes,
Too
ma'am,
high.
she is. Alright. I'm gonna initiate my go around. And once we're out and lined back up, I'll be right back with you. But just one last view while we're peeling out here. And welcome back. As you can see, we're substantially better
Approaching.
lined up.
0, 2.
Still not really on ref where we want it to be. We're hoping for flaps 40 at 123 knots. Alright, now we're flaps 40. 100. Lights on the ground are looking nice here in the twilight.
40, 30, 20, 10.
And we're down. Lovely. Alright, I don't think they're going to appreciate us sitting on the runway. So let's cancel the thrust reverse. There we go. I had the throttle crack open, so it wasn't allowing me to cancel thrust reverse. Alright, the terminal is located at the far end of this runway. We'll be crossing over the perpendicular runway. You can see the lights of that approaching us. Do a little high-speed taxi. Risk the arcade view. And here comes our terminal, so let's get ready for the turnoff. Looks like Fiji has X-planes, fairly standard default. Yeah, we'll stop blinding everyone with landing lights. Switch over to taxi lights. Well, it doesn't get much easier than this. I'm not sure I've actually encountered a situation where the taxiway line actually was the exact same paint stripe as that. That's incredibly convenient. All right. Fortunately, not being an add-on airport, the auto gate plug-in is not going to do anything for us. Looks like that gate is set up for some heavy metal right now. It is substantially higher than the body of the 737 would require. And they haven't given us any stoplights. It's very interesting. The next gate over has the appropriate paint markings, and this one does not. Well, regardless, I think we can say we have safely arrived in Fiji with slight sightseeing go-around due to my sightseeing. Our scheduled flight time today was supposed to be 3 hours and 24 minutes. And I believe, looks like we're at about 3 hours and 14 minutes. So at this point, I'm going to get us parked, initiate ground power, and start shutting us down. I'd like to thank you for joining us today on FBFT. I hope you enjoy how this flight went, and if you have any thoughts or commentary, please feel free to leave it in the comments, and we will certainly consider it as we publish our future videos.